हेलो एवरीवन। आज हम लोग जो हैं आफ्टर कंप्लीशन ऑफ आवर P2 थ्योरी प्रैक्टिकल टास्क सूडो कोड्स फ्लो चार्ट्स एंड एवरीथिंग, आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे प्री रिलीज मटेरियल और स्पेसिफिकली जो हम डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं दैट इज P22 वेरिएंट 2। आने वाले दिनों में we will also discuss P 2.1 and 2.3. Maybe if not live, then through YouTube videos, we will also be covering those. So let us start. This is Cambridge O level Computer Science P2 October November 2020 P22 pre-release material. So it says your preparation for the exam should include attempting the following practical tasks by writing and testing a program or programs. By writing and testing a program or program means that you can write a single program as a whole, or you can write different functions and procedures for the same program. So a program can be made monolithic, a single program, or program can be made by different people maybe, or by the same person. But that program, when it is written by different people or same person, but in parts, those parts are called subroutines, and those subroutines might be procedure and function. So it can also be functions and procedures. So we have actually not made any functions or procedures because that was to us it was irrelevant as far as pseudocode is concerned. So we have actually used just one single program to achieve this pre-release material solution. So it says that an online computer shop sells customized personal computers. Every computer sold includes a basic set of components costing $200, and additional items can be added from the table. So it means that as soon as you start the transaction, basic set of components, which is $200, is there. So there is no option. All of it is part, I mean, the $200 costing components are part of the transaction deal. And then other items from the table below can be added from the table. Okay. So every computer sold include a basic set of components costing $200. Whether you choose or you don't choose, this $200 costing components are there over the invoice and additional items. Now, these additional items have categories. These two are casings. Casings are having item code A1 and A2, and description is compact and tower casing and their respective prices. Then the second category is basically the RAM. RAM, random access memory, has code item code starting with B, so B1, B2, and B3. That is 8 GB RAM, 16 GB RAM, and 32 GB RAM respectively. And then we have got main hard disk drive with the item code starting with C. And then we have got two different hard disk drives with two different capacities. That is C1 and C2, 1 TB hard disk and 2 TB hard disk with 49.99 and 89.99 dollars price respectively. And then, sorry, there are three, C1, C2, and C3, and there is then this 4 TB hard disk. Then we have solid state drives, SSDs. These are just two, 240 GB SSD and 480 GB SSD. Item code is starting with D, and that is D1 and D2. And then we have got second hard disk drive that is starting with E1, E2, and E3, letter E in the item code. And that is 1 TB hard disk, 2 TB hard disk, and 4 TB hard disk. And their prices are 49.99, 89.99, and 129.99 respectively. Then we have got optical drive, as in CD drives or DVD drives, and those are F1, F2, and these are DVD, Blu-ray player, and rewriter, and the prices are 50 and 100 respectively. Then we have got operating system, starting with the code G. So operating system is G1 and G2. Standard version is $100 and professional version is $175. So once the transaction starts, $200 basic set of components is included, and then basically you choose additional items from this table. As well as a basic set of components, every computer must include one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive from the table. Okay, so basic set of components, $200 is there, and then you have to choose one RAM, one hard disk, and one case. So you must include one case, one RAM, and one hard disk from the table. So you will have to choose from case category, one item. You would have to choose RAM, one item from this category, and then you have to choose one of the main hard disk drive. So one item requires to be chosen out of these three categories: casing, RAM, or the main hard disk drive. So there are three categories. So $200 components are part of it, and then out of these three categories, you have to choose one item from each of them. A computer is supplied with or without operating system. So whether you choose operating system or you don't, write and test a program or programs for the online computer shop. Your program or programs must include appropriate prompts. What are prompts? Prompts are basically those questions which are written, or those statements which are there that tells you that what needs to be entered. So whenever you are entering data, the phrase that appears before that blank actually makes you understand that what sort of data is required to be input, and that is the prompt. For example, in school admission form, it is written name, and then you write your name, and then father's name, then you write your father's name. That name and father's name, those two phrases are actually called prompts. So your program or programs must include appropriate prompts for the data entry. Data must be validated on entry. So all of the validations, range check, limit check, type check, and any other checks need to be basically utilized as per the entry. We will see that what sort of data entry is being made, and accordingly, whatever the suitable validation check, we will be using that. We will describe it later. Error messages and other output needs to be set out clearly. So what are error messages? Error messages are basically those messages which, when a validation fails, appear on the screen to let user know that the data that was entered is somehow incorrect. And other outputs are the output of transaction, like the total amount and all, that needs to be appeared over the screen clearly. All arrays, variables, constants, and other identifiers. Identifiers are any name given to arrays, variables, constants, procedures, functions, and those should be meaningful. Meaningful means that you don't have to use a variable which is A, B, or C, or D, which is totally irrelevant to their purposes. So if it is a student name that we need to enter, then the variable name should be a student name or something like name, which actually defines its purpose, not A, B, C, D. All right. So every variable array, a constant that we are going to use should have a meaningful name. Now, you will need to complete these three tasks. Each task must be fully tested. What does it mean, fully tested? We need to supply the test data with every data input. There are validations. When there are validations, there needs to be some data that is used to check the program. So validations are always checked against some data, and we will have to use that data as test data to check the program if all the inputs which are being made are against proper validation checks. So task one. Task one says setting up the system and ordering the main items. Write a program to use arrays to store item codes, description, and price. What does it mean? It means that we will be declaring arrays, and we will be actually copying the data from this table to the array. Means all these descriptions should be copied, all these item codes should be copied, these prices needs to be inside the array. Now we will have to have three different arrays for item code, description, and price. And we will be capturing this data. Now we had two options. Number one, we take input of each of this item and assign that to respective array element. And the other option was, since this table is given and it is hard coded, what we have actually done, we have hard coded this table and we created the array. We have this hard coded table and we assigned all the values inside the program, and we did not bother with the idea to have the user of the program to enter all the elements at the start. So when the program starts, it has all of the elements in it. Allow a customer to choose one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk. It means at first, when the program starts, all of the tables items are already loaded to the array, and afterwards that task one will ask the user to enter one case out of those two case categories over here, one RAM out of these three RAM categories over here, and one main hard disk out of these three main hard disk categories over here. So let's see how it is achieved. This is a simulator of the program. It will simulate the requirements of the program. Let's see how what is being asked is actually being achieved. So task one, we have to make a choice. So we choose task one, and then it says that all arrays are populated successfully, means whatever the data that was hard coded in that table is taken, the arrays are created, and the data is now in the arrays. So item code, item description, item price, category, you can see that we haven't done anything. As soon as the program starts, as soon as the task one starts, the data is taken from the table and it is populated, means entered in the array. Now, these are three categories of case, RAM, and main hard disk. New sales initiated. Default basic set of component costing 200 is added already. One case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive is required to be added. So now it is asking you to choose one of the case from item A1 and A2. All right. So let's choose A2. We have to enter item code. That is A2. I have chosen A2. Now it says choose a RAM item code. Now we have got three types of RAM: 8 GB, 16 GB, and 32 GB. If I like to choose 16 GB, I will enter B2. Now it is asking choose a main hard disk drive item code. So out of 1 TB, 2 TB, and 4 TB. So let's say I want to go for 1 TB hard disk. So I will enter C1. Remember, this is a simulation. Simulation of what is required is being done. At second stage, we are now realizing that how the whole thing actually works. Once we are done with it, it means the program that was made is correct, and then we will indulge ourselves into what do we say, details and pseudocodes of it. So we have chosen C1. So now you can see that this is our computer invoice that says that item case tower that totals 150, RAM 16 GB that is 150, 149.99, main hard disk drive 1 TB hard disk that is 49.99, and basic set of components is there. Total price of the computer is 549.98. Now, whoever has a question, they should ask the question in the chat. Hamza, you please pay attention to the question which are being raised over the YouTube. It is going live over the YouTube. There might be few questions asked over there. So as soon as there is any question, because I am busy here with the Zoom, you basically tackle all the questions at
Copy
YouTube,
that, sir.
please. I have got one of my best student, Hamza Khurram, with me today, and he will be actually helping me to solve this and to teach this PRM. So there is a question. Aram Khan says that, sir, basic components are to be added in the price. Yes, they are to be added in the price because they are being sold. So whatever the invoice is, invoice would have basic set of components for $2 there. This is part of it. Hafsa Mahmood, you have raised your hand. If there is any question, please do ask that question. Okay. So basic components should be there. And after those basic components, you have to choose one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive. Yes, this is task one. Now, let's get back to the PRM. Now it says that use array to store the item codes, description, and price. So we have actually have done it. Then allow a customer to choose one case, one RAM, and one hard disk drive. You have seen that we have done it. Calculate the price of computer using the cost of chosen item and the basic set of component. Arham, do you see what it says? Calculate the price of the computer using the cost of chosen item, which we have chosen, the case, the RAM, and the main hard disk alongside the basic components. Store and output the chosen items and the price of the computer. So we have created few variables which actually store which items are chosen, and a variable that actually computes the price, the collective price, the total of the, what do we say, invoice, and it actually shows it over the screen. Now, Hamza, are you with us? So please show yourself
Yes,
to
sir.
everyone.
I apparently can't open my video, so if you could please allow that.
And your screen with it, your video.
Yes, sir. I can't share my screen right now. So could you please allow me to do that? The video and the screen.
Yes, Samsa. Now, what you have just said, please repeat.
Sir, could you please allow me to share my video?
Yes, I can. Hold on. You are now panelist. You can show your video, Hamza.
It says that you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Now you are the host.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Hamza Khurram. I will be joining Sir in explaining the PRM for O level variant 22. So
So,
shall we start
eh,
with the pseudocode,
yes,
sir?
yes. The
Okay.
task one I have described. I have discussed it, and I have shown a possible output of the program so that they could realize that how the task one will be completed if it is a program and if it is being executed. Please
Right.
increase the font size, Hamza.
G. Okay. Uh, is that fine? The font size?
Further.
O- Okay. All right. So this is the pseudocode for task one. If you recall from the question paper, task one asks you to set up the arrays so that you may choose the items. And so that's what we're doing here. We have to use arrays to store the item code, description, and price. We have to allow the customer to choose one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive. And we have to calculate the price of the computer using the cost and the basic set of components. So there was a question earlier whether the basic set of components is included in the price, and this line within the task says that yes, it is. So the basic price, before we even start adding anything to the cart, the basic price we already have is $200. And so whatever we add, whichever case we choose, whichever RAM and whichever main hard disk drive, the price of that one is added on top of the $200, which is the basic set of components. Throughout the code, we will be using these identifiers. The category identifier will be used to describe which category the item belongs to. The data type for it will be a string. The item code identifier will be used for the code of the item. So let's say we are choosing, for instance, a case. So that would be either A1 or A2, depending on what the item code is given. Make note that the item code we are not choosing on our own. The item code is given to us in the question paper itself, the CIE, the PRM question paper that includes the item code. So we're not making any of that. The item description is the array which will store the description of each corresponding item, and then the price is and the data type for item description will also be a string. Finally, we have the price identifier, which represents the array which will store the corresponding prices of each item, and the data type is real. We don't have an integer for the simple value that the prices, as we saw in the simulator, the prices can be 149.99, and so that .99 needs to be stored as a real value, because this is pseudocode, and the corresponding data type in pseudocode is the real. All right, so let's begin with the code. Here, since this is the beginning of the task and we do not have the items already populated, we need to declare every array and every variable that we will use. Make note that once we do, as we go along as we go into task 2 and task 3, we will not be declaring the arrays again, because what that actually does is that every time you declare an array, it resets all the values, and we don't want that, because in this task we are already setting up all of the values, all of the descriptions, the prices, the everything. And so we will never declare these again once we move on from task 1. But for now we're in task 1, so let's have a look. So the number of items is declared as a constant because that will never change. We have a set number of cases, RAMs, hard disk drives, optical drives, secondary drives, and I believe the operating system. And so the number of items will never change. next we are declaring, as we mentioned here, the category, the identifier category. We are using this identifier to declare its corresponding array now. So this statement is declare category as an array of items from index 1 to items. So basically um, what this syntax does is that it says that this identifier is being assigned to this data object, which is an array, which will have an index from 1. So for example, a category comma 1, if I write this here, category of 1 is a valid reference because this exists. And so it goes from 1 to items. In this case, item is 17. So if I say category 17, again, this is a valid reference because this exists in the memory. If I say category 18, that is beyond the upper limit, which is in this case items, and the item value is 17. So the value for the upper limit here is 17, and category 18 goes beyond the maximum index that we have stored in the memory. Next we do something similar, and then of course we say what data type it is. So we're declaring category as an array which ranges from 1 to items, in this case 17, which is declared as a string. So next we do the same thing for the item code. We declare the item code as an array ranging from 1 again to the maximum allowed as string, and then similarly for item description, and then for price, but with one minor difference where the data type is this time a real data type instead of the string, which corresponds to what we previously said in the comments. So this is comments are a helpful way to plan ahead as to what you need to do. Okay, so now that we're done with the array descriptions, here these arrays are the ones we will be using throughout the code. So these will never change. These are the ones we will be adding the values to, and it'll make a lot more sense as we go along. But just to give a sort of a preface, these are the arrays which will be storing the options that we choose. So if you noticed from the question paper, there are, for example, let's say we are choosing a main hard disk drive. There are multiple options for that, but we can only choose one. And so the option that we choose is stored in these two arrays, where the item code of the object that we have chosen is stored in new sale item, and the price of that is stored in a corresponding array, which is new sale item price. So again, similar declarations. We have a new sale item, which is the identifier, which is declared as an array ranging from 1 to 7. And we're declaring that as string. If you notice, we are not saying 1 to items here. And the reason is that uh, this is the total number of items that we have. This represents the total number of items we are allowed to choose. So even though we have 17 items, some of these items belong to the same category. So we cannot choose more than one casing or more than one hard disk drive. So that's why the maximum categories that we can choose is 7. And so here we don't actually need more than 7 elements in this array, because we're never going to be selecting more than 7 objects. So the upper limit here is 7. And so new sale item is declared as a string. New sale item price, of course, is declared as a real array, an array with data type real, because it's going to be storing the prices. All right, so here we have a couple of variables. Again, why these even exist will make sense as we go along the pseudocode, but just for a little bit of a preface, here we have a my option, which is a character. This will not actually be used in this task. We'll be using this in task 2. We have an item ID, which we will be using throughout. We have my price, computer price, and item count. Computer price is the identifier, is the variable rather, to which we will be assigning the total price. So throughout our program, as we select items and as we see what their prices are and as we accumulate them, we will be adding each individual price to this identifier, to this variable. So this will represent the totaling effect in our code. Okay, so now that we have set up the basic the memory locations essentially of what we need, uh, this is the task we're supposed to carry out, and this is the code for said task. So as this comment says here, this part initializes all the arrays that we have just declared. So this is a requirement as per CIE. Before you actually populate them, we just for formalities, we will actually initialize them. So here we have declared a variable x as an integer.
Hamza, Hamza, students are asking to please speak slow so that they could grasp it, please.
Right, my bad. Right, sure. Okay, so here we have a variable x which we are declaring as an integer, and the purpose of this is that we will be using this in the following statement, in the statement right next to it. We will be using this as a counter variable, and what this variable will count is the index from all the way from 1 to the maximum items allowed. So if you notice here, we have for x is equals to 1 2 items. 1 second, let me just index this properly here. From for x equals 1 2 items, and then these statements, let's go through them. So category x is equals to an empty string. So what that basically does is that we noticed up here that we have a category array which stores the category that each item belongs to. And so for every iteration within this block of code, for every iteration of the value of x, we are setting the corresponding element, the element in the corresponding index, to an empty string. So an empty string is used when the data type of an element is a string, and you want that element to have nothing in it. You don't want any value, you want absolutely nothing. And so that is
So
when
it is also called null.
yeah, a null string, or it's also called a null data type, a none data type. And so a null string or an empty string is used when we want to when we want to initialize a element or an array which is of data type string. And so similarly, the item code is also declared as a string, as is the item description. And so to initialize each of those, we need to set both of those to an empty string as well. Now, the price element, so the corresponding element for the price array is set to 0. And the reason is that price is not a string. Price is a real the price is a real data type. So 0, or actually 0.00, because it can also have decimals. So this is what we're setting the price array, because an empty string does not make sense when the data type is a real, because an empty string or a null string by definition of the name is associated with strings. And so you cannot assign a null string even though it has nothing in it, but it's still a data type of string, and you cannot assign that to an array which is declared as a data type of real. And so that's why we have declared price of x as 0.00. And so now for the actual loop part of this. So the reason we're writing category X instead of, let's say, category 1, category 2, and then like doing them all over, is because we know how many elements each array contains, and we know that to be the maximum number of items, because that is that is the maximum items that we can ever buy, that we would ever have to display. And category item code, so all four of these arrays contain the data for every single one of them. And so we know that the maximum index for each of them is the maximum number of items that we have, which up here we declared as 17. We set the value as 17, and that value never changes. Simple courtesy of it being a constant. So here we actually run this in a for loop. And so what this does is that every time it comes to next, it automatically bumps up the value of x. So this x is now equals to 2. And so category 2, item code 2, item description 2, and price of 2. And so it sets all of their values, and then it comes back to next, and then so forth and so on. It bumps it up every time. It increments it to 3, 4, 5, etc., until it reaches 17, which is the maximum index allowed as per this loop statement. And once it initializes category 17, item code 17, item description 17, and price 17, it then finally exits this loop. And by now, what we have done is that we have successfully initialized all of the arrays that we have declared. And so they are now ready to contain the data that we feed them. Remember the goal of doing all of this. The reason we're doing all of this is we want to execute. For now, our very first goal is we want to execute this this part of the code. We want to use arrays to store the item code, description, and price. And in order to do that, we need to first initialize the array so that they're blank, they're clean, and so that we can feed them with our own values, which is exactly what we're doing here. So this, if you look at the table that is given in the actual paper in the question, this corresponds exactly, these values correspond exactly to the table that we have been given. So category 1 and 2, if you remember from the table, we had two cases, and so the first element of category will contain the string case, because the first object is a case object, and the second object or the second item is a case item. And so category index 1 and category index 2 will both contain cases, because simply because both of the corresponding items, or both of the items we are representing, which are the first two, belong to the category case. 3, 4, and 5, if you recall, the next category, we had three rams, we had three options for random access memory, and so category 3, 4, and 5, they are all rams. Similarly, we had another three main hard disk drives, and so the sixth element, the seventh element, and the eighth element of the array category will also contain these strings, because they're simply defining, or describing rather, the category that the items that they represent belong to. So just for a quick recap, what we're doing here is that for every item in the table we were given, we are saying that, going down the list, what index, what item number each, like what category each item number belongs to. So item number 1 and 2, if you open up the table, like you can see it side by side, item number 1 and 2 were both cases. Item number 3, 4, and 5 were rams. Item number 6, 7, and 8 were main hard disk drives, and similarly, item number 9 and 10 were solid state drives. 11, 12, and 13 were second hard disk drives. So the user had, or the customer had, the option to buy a second hard disk drive. 15 and 14 and 15 were optical drives. Um, and finally, the last two, 16 and 17, were operating systems. If you
Answer,
notice,
it means
yes,
that
sir.
every column corresponds to an array. Every column is now turned into an array, and if we put these arrays side by side, it becomes the same table as it is
Yeah,
given in the PRN.
yeah. I was getting to that with the like the next areas. Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So if you also notice here, we have the maximum index as category of 17. And so this again corresponds to the fact that if we come all the way up here, the maximum items we have is 17. So we won't need an 18th category, because an 18th object doesn't exist. And so as Zafar just said, all of these belong to an individual array. And so when we put these arrays side by side, we can actually reconstruct the exact same table that we were given in the question. Now, if you notice here, next we are populating the item code array.
Can you
And
can you show them that table once again
sure,
from the
sure, sure.
PRM? Yeah,
Sure, I'll just pull it
so
up.
they have
Just a
a
second.
better idea of what we are trying
Mm,
to say.
let me reshare the screen just a second. Okay. So here, if you notice, one second. Okay, so here we have this table. So the case, so if you see, the first two items are cases with item code A1 and A2, and they both belong to the category of case. If you notice what we did here, this is exactly the same thing we're doing. So category 1, which is the first element, belongs to the case, and category 2, which is the second element, also belongs to the case. And so similarly here we have case 1 and case 2, both of which are both of which are category cases. And so if you notice, we declared the arrays of category, item code, item description, and item price. which are the exact same as the headings in this table. So category, item code, description, and price. So what we're doing actually is that we are populating the arrays in such a way that if we put them side by side, we can actually reconstruct this exact table. And so as we saw in the simulator, when we actually pull back through it, when we go through it, it actually displays a table in the exact same format that you see right here on the screen. And so that's why we are populating the arrays in that manner. And that's how we're going to be printing it, because that will then display this exact block of data to the actual user who is running the simulation. So here, once we're done populating the categories, oh, and we are not running a loop here simply because we don't have a same value. So here we ran a loop through every index, because we were assigning every element of this like of every array the same value over and over again. However, here categories 1 and 2 are case, 3, 4, 5 are RAM, etc., which means that we are not assigning the same values to every single element, which means that we're going to have to do it manually, which is why we are not using a loop structure, which might seem as that might be more efficient, but it's actually not going to do what we want it to do, because we're not assigning the same values over and over again. Next up, we have the item code array. And so if we take a quick look back here, this actually corresponds exactly to the second column of this table. And so so case 1 and case 2 are A1 and A2. So like the first two elements of the category array, which are the object case and the object case again, uh, are A1 and A2, which corresponds exactly here. Item code 1 is A1 and item code 2 is A2. If you have noticed by now, we are using the exact same index for every item as we used in all the previous arrays, for the simple reason that we will, once we print all of these, we want them to reconstruct this exact same table. And so every the index for every corresponding item number should match exactly. So you can't have category RAM with item code B1, which describes it as 32 GB, because 32 GB belongs to item code B3, whereas 8 GB is the correct description for the item code B1. So here we populate every single element of the item code array following the exact same item codes that are given to us in the table. So A1 and A2 are the first two elements. As we can see here, B1, B2, and B3 are the three RAMs. C1, C2, and C3 are the hard disk drives, and so on. We have D for the solid state drive, E, F, and G for second hard disk drive, optical drive, and the operating system, respectively. And so once we're done with these, in a similar manner, we're going to populate all of the item description arrays, or elements rather. We're going to populate the item description array, which has all the elements. So and this is where we have to be careful again, as we were with the item code array, that every single index needs to match up exactly to the item number that it belongs to. So for instance, let's say index 5. So item description 5 needs to have the description that's given to the fifth object in the table. So the fifth object in the table is this is the first one, second one, third, fourth, and fifth. So item code 5 belongs to the category RAM, which has item code B3 and description 32 GB, which is exactly what we've done here. Item description is 32 GB. And if we look back in the previous array, item code 5 is also B3, which is exactly what we wanted. And if we go back one step further, we can see that category 5 is also RAM, which again is what we wanted, so that we may reconstruct the exact same table. And then finally, once we have populated all the corresponding elements, we finally move on to the price array, which is of data type real. Again, it is the only array in all of these which belong to a different data type, simply because all of these can be stored as words or combination of characters, whereas this is a real value. And you might be asking, what if we store these values as string? I mean, a string is allowed to have numerical strings, so why aren't we using that here? Well, the reason is that later down the line, when we choose the object, we will also be calculating our price, and so we cannot add strings. We can concatenate strings, but there's no way to add the numerical value of a string and have the computer actually understand what we want it to do. So we have to use this as a real data type, because even though it would in theory be perfectly valid to write this, where price 6 is 49.99, and we can do everything. We can output this, we can show the user that the price is 49.99, and it makes sense. But the only place that this fails is actually a major part of this program, where we actually want to calculate the value of we want to calculate the discounts in task 3, and we want to calculate the total computer price throughout the tasks. And we can't do that with a string, because the only manipulation allowed with a string is concatenation, and we simply can't do that. And like concatenation won't help us in this case.
So
So
for the price, the best data type is real. For the best,
yes.
for the prices, the best data type is real, and it can also be currency sometimes.
Yeah. It can also be currency with because it's for instance $175. So once we have done that, we this is the part we all saw in the simulator, where the code actually tells us that all the arrays have been populated, because once again this is running in the background. We don't actually see any of this happen, because this isn't being output to the screen, this isn't being shown. And so a neat way of letting the user know that what you wanted to do has actually happened, and that an error hasn't occurred anywhere around here, is that once all of this is executed, we're going to say that, hey, the arrays have been successfully populated, and then we're going to move
Hamza,
on to the
can
next part.
you open up the simulator side by side so that people can
Yes, sure.
evaluate it?
Sure. One second. Just a second. I'm going to download it. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Um, One second. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Sir, is the simulator visible alongside?
Make it a little bigger. You know why? How?
Sure. 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 Just a second.
Left top icon that is appearing. Left top. Left top. Yes. Right click it. No, not that. This one. Yes. Right click. Properties.
Okay. One second.
Properties. And then next step font and this. Choose the size. Okay. 24 is enough.
Which do you recommend?
20,
24. Okay.
24.
Right.
All right. Now
Okay.
it is okay.
So right. So
Choose
let's
task
say
one.
that we want to do task one. Yep. Task one. And so here, see the first line it the first line it outputs is that it tells us that all arrays have been populated successfully. But if you notice, there was so much work that happened before we got to that point, but none of that was actually shown to us, because we didn't put any of that in an output statement. So the initialization and the population and all of that was happening in the background before anything was output. And so this is why we have this statement, which basically indicates that everything that happened up till here was executed without a flaw, and everything was perfect, and we are ready to move on to the next part. So here, if you notice, whoops, my bad. If you notice, then this is the exact same table that we had right here. If I can just pull it up, give me a second. Here, so this table and this table are the exact same, except that here we only have to choose one of these three vital categories. So in the task it mentioned that it must choose one RAM, one main hard disk drive, and one case, and then the other and all the other categories are optional. And so task one has to, as it says right here, task one needs to allow a customer to choose one case, one RAM, and a main hard disk drive. And so that is what we want out of this one. That is what we want out of task one. If we return to the code, so here it asks you to choose an item code. So if we back up a bit, let's have a look at the code. So here, this is the format which actually allows us to output everything in this way. And so the item code and space 9 basically means after we display the item code, which here is, let's say, A1, after we display that, we are giving 9 spaces just so that everything is orderly, in an orderly fashion, and everything is in perfect in vertical columns. And so all of this is just the formatting required to output it in the correct order. And so
This
now,
can
yeah,
be
it's
while in exam. Excuse me, Hamza. While in
it
exam,
says,
this part of heading and showing the menu can be skipped.
yeah,
So right from the output item code till this next can be skipped in exam.
from here to here,
No, from output item code. A
from here to
little
here.
up, a little up, up, up.
Oh,
Yes,
from all of
from
this.
here.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
right.
So this is not required as this was not mentioned, and it will only increase the size of the pseudocode if you like. You don't have to actually show the item. As it is understood by the given PRN that these items are there and they are already uploaded to the array, we need not to show it over the screen. This is just for the purpose of simulator, and if you like, you can skip it. Please go
Hmm.
ahead.
Okay, so once we have done that, we are now gonna simply tell the user that we have a new sale initiated, which means that you can now proceed to choose your items, and the default basic set of components costing $200 is added. What this means is that right here it said that every computer sold includes a basic set of components costing $200, and an additional item can be added from the table. So all of these, everything that is included in the table is something we are going to choose. We are actively going to look at the price. We're gonna choose which one we add, and the prices will be updated respectively. However, before we even chose anything, the very basic, like let's say the motherboard of the computer, and the very basic the components which costed $200 were added to your cart. So there's nothing we can do about that. We have to pay, or the user will have to pay $200 regardless of what we or anyone else wants. So that $200 has already been added, and whatever the price of the items that we add is going to be added on top of this $200. So there was a question earlier as to whether that's necessary. Yes, that is necessary because we have no control over this. This is what the question told us to do. So now it says that one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive is required to be added, which we can see in the simulator right here. This is the corresponding line. This line corresponds to this one. And so after this, again, we have the formatting, which from an exam point of view, we can skip. But this basically shows us that we may choose the case from either A1 or A2. And so we enter the value of we enter the item code of the case that we want. Now, I'll actually run this before and then show you what happens afterwards. Okay, so it has already when I ran this in the background, it added the corresponding prices and the description and everything. But this is what actually happened. So as soon as we made an input, it ran a while loop. So the code runs a while loop, and it says that while the item ID is not equals to A1 and it is not equals to an item ID is not equals to A2. This is the validation check. In the question, it mentioned that like
Presence check.
all your
This is presence check.
sorry, yeah, this is the presence check, and it said that that there has to be checks for all of your for all of your tasks, and so this is the part which does that. So it says that the item ID needs to either have the value, the string value A1 or the string value A2 for it to be accepted and for it to move forward. And so while it is not that, so while neither of these are contained in the item ID, we will output to choose a case item code. So this is the prompt. If you recall from the paper, it said that we here that your programmer programs must include appropriate prompts. So this is that prompt. We are letting the user know, which was right here. We are letting the user know that we want you to choose an item case code from this, and once it does that, once the user inputs the item that they want, that value is now stored to item ID. This is the identifier as we saw up here, way up here. We saw that item ID was declared as a string, and so this is the variable into which we are actually inputting the data that we want for the item ID for that case. And so once we have done that, it's gonna see as to which one it belongs. And if item ID is neither a1 or nor a2, so if item ID is not equals to a1 or ID is not equals to a2, then we are going to output choose either a1 or a2. This is basically the error message. So if the value that the user entered was a1, then this condition becomes false. And it runs. So if this so the if statement runs when the conditions are true, right? And the or means that either this is true or this is true. But since this is a not equals to, this will actually only be true if this statement is false. If that makes any sense. So if item ID is not equals to a1, then this is true. So if this is true or this is true, then it's gonna tell us that we have an error here, that the item that we actually entered, it belongs to neither of these two categories. It's neither a1 nor is it a2. So it doesn't actually belong to what we want, and we need to input it again, which is where the while loop comes in, because the very statement of while was that as long as it belongs to neither of these, we're gonna run this. And so this is what's going to happen. As soon as we input either A1 or A2, it's going to exit out of this, and it's going to proceed to the next part of the code. And so that happened automatically here. And so now we are
Here,
in.
Hamza, when you enter
Yes, sir.
second category, please show them that how this validation is working.
Sure. So right, so this is the second category, and we will work with this in just a second. So here now we have entered the item ID category. Sorry, we are now assigning the values we want to the array, which I mentioned off the top of the task, that these are the arrays we're going to be working with for our calculations and for storing the chosen objects. And so so now we're actually going to use those. If we head back down here, right here. So once item ID contains the choice of the user as to which item they want, either a1 or a2, then we come down here and we say if item ID is equals to a1, then the first element of new sale item is going to contain the description stored in item description 1. Now, if you see remember how we mentioned many times that the item descriptions and all of the arrays need to be perfectly coherent, where the first element of each array needs to describe appropriately the respective columns of the first item. And so item description 1 uh, corresponds to a1. So if we have chosen a1, the item sale is actually the first case, because a1 is the first case, which is the first item. And so the description it has will be stored in the first element of the description array, which in this case is compact, but which we have described way up here. So if we come here, item description 1 is case compact. And so this case compact will be assigned, this value will now be assigned. If we come back down here, this value will be assigned to new sale item 1. And similarly, the price of A1, or the item corresponding to the item code A1, which in this case is 75 point not not, it will be assigned to new sale item price 1. where again it is the first element, the first item we have bought. So each of new sale item and each of new sale item price, each index will again be corresponding to a specific item. So the first item that we actually choose, that's going to be in new sale item 1, and its price is going to be new sale item price 1. um, so now if you notice, we actually had two choices for cases. We had either A1 and we had or we had A2. So if let's say that the user has entered A2, which is now stored in item ID. So when it comes to this statement, when it sees whether this is true or false, this is going to be false. So because item ID is not equals to A1, it's equals to A2, so it's going to ignore all of this, and it's gonna come onto here where it's gonna check that whether it's A2. And of course, since here it can't pass if it's neither one of those. So if it's not A1, then it has to be A2. And so it comes into this condition where it's doing the same thing, except here we are assigning the first element, that the first item that we buy, which is represented by the first element of our new sale item array, to the description of the second item in the table. I'm gonna just show what this means because this can be a bit confusing. Here, the second element is the one corresponding to item code A2, and it has the description tower, which again, since we have set up everything to be corresponding to each other, this value will be stored in description 2. And so item description 2 is assigned to new sale item 1. If you're wondering if this particular thing, if this indexing doesn't make sense, why 1 is being assigned to as it was being done here, basically this array, the new sale item and the new sale item price, have nothing to do with the previous order of the objects. These have to do to the order that we select them in. So item sale so new sale item 1 will will have the value of the case that we select, which can either be the first case, which is A1, or it can be the second case, which is A2. If it's the second case, is going to is going to pass this statement, this condition, where it's going to be assigned the second values, because we have chosen the second case. And if it's A1, which is the first object here, we're going to assign it price. We're going to assign it the item descriptions and the prices stored in the first index of both of these arrays, simply because they contain the values of the first item here. So I hope that makes sense. And so yes, I had to show this the presence check and the validation for the next category. So let's do that. So once we have done that, once we have chosen the case, we now head down into this part where again this can be ignored from from the exam point of view, because this simply tells us that we are now into rams. So so here, so now it's going to run the same thing, except here we have three choices. We have either B1, B2, or B3. Each of them have a different item price, a different description. Of course, they're the same category because right now we are dealing with RAMs. So the statement up here, which previously ran for A1 and A2, is now extended for B1, B2, and B3. And this may be extended to whatever number of values we actually have, because that's what's required. We have to choose any one of any number of categories. In each category, in this category, for example, there are three objects, and so we have to choose any one of them. And so this statement right here says that if that while item ID does not contain any of these values, we're going to do all of this. And so what this does is that this again is the prompt, which we see right here. And just give me a second here. And so now what we're doing is we're inputting the item ID again, because we may reuse the same variable because they have different units, and before we do anything, we are inputting them again. So whatever was previously stored in the variable has been overwritten, so we don't need to worry about that. Now what it's doing is that saying that if item code was neither of these, so that's what this statement means, that if item code is not equals to this, or it's not equals to this, or it's not equals to this, so if all of these are false, then but I mean, like, if the logic is true but the actual computer statement is false, which is the condition of if, then we're going to output that we need to choose any one of these. And so let's say we go with B2.
No, 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 hold on.
Wait, wait,
I
wait.
wanted to show you the validation check if it is working. You have chosen,
Right.
anyways. All right. Show that when we will be choosing third category.
Yeah, when we'll choose this. Okay, sure. Um, so it does. Or should I just restart the program?
No, 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 no. Don't restart.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. So once we have done that, once we have chosen either B1, B2, or B3, then again it's going to do the exact same thing that we did above, except this time we need to be vigilant about the values that we are adding. So item description 3. So if we choose B1, which is the third item here, is going to add item description 3 to the new sale item 2, which is done, which corresponds to the B1 category of the B1 code of category RAM, which has a description of 8 GB and a price of 79.99. So it's going to add the description here to the new sale item 2, which indicates that this is the second item here. The 2 here indicates that this is the second item that we are choosing. And so the 3 here just corresponds to the list that we have stored it in, which the system has stored it in, which has nothing to do with the order in which we are choosing it. So and then new sale item price 2, which indicates the price of the second object, the second item that we have chosen, is going to be given price index 3, because again that is the price stored in here, which is 79.99 in this case. um, if item sale ID, okay, so if let's say that the user has chosen, let's say B2, then this condition will be false, and it's going to ignore all of this, and it's going to come into here where it's going to check this condition. And if this condition is true, then it's going to enter into here where it's going to assign item description 4 to the second element that we buy, and price of 4 to the second element that we buy, simply because B2, this one right here, is the if you see 1, 2, 3, and 4, so the fourth object that we have bought, or the fourth item, has the item code B2, and the price 149.99. And all of this will be stored in the fourth index of each respective array. So this object, the description, the properties of this item, will be stored in category 4, item code 4, I believe it's item code here, and item description 4, and price 4. And so we are assigning all of that to the second index of the second element of what we of the new sale item and the new sale item price, which again indicate that this is the second object that we have bought. And let's say that he hadn't chose the our user hadn't chose B1 or B2, but instead B3. So we would come into here where it would do the same thing, except this time I believe this had to be 5, where this time instead of this is gonna do uh, the same thing, but for the fifth item. So it's gonna say that B3 is the fifth item, is the fifth element in each of these corresponding arrays. And so the category is RAM. The description this time will be 32, and and the price is going to be 299.99. And so all of that is assigned to the corresponding elements. And so, all right, now let's see the validation check. So this again can be ignored. So here we are doing the exact same thing again, except this time we are running on the main hard disk drive category. So which has the item codes which begin with C. So we have 3 hard disk drives. We have C1, we have C2, and we have C3. And so this while loop is going to run for when neither of these are selected. And it's gonna give you the prompt that choose one of these, and it's going to input the item ID. Again, we don't need to worry about what was previously in this, because we don't care, because it can be overwritten. And so this now, let me enter a false value. So let me say I said that I want to enter C4. Now this says that you must choose either C1, C2, or C3, because C4 does not actually exist, and neither of these are satisfied, which means that that we will stay within this loop, because this is this is true, and remember the while loop runs on true, and so this statement is satisfied because this is true and this is true and this is true. So item ID is not equals to C1. That's true because item ID had C4, which is not equals to C1. So this statement is true, and this statement is true, and this statement is true. So it neither belongs to C3, neither does it belong to C2, and neither does it belong to C1. So all of these statements are true, which means that we need to continue asking the user to input because they didn't choose it well, because they didn't choose one of the three options they were given. And so but once they do that, let's say we enter C1. It goes on to the next one. Okay, we haven't gotten to that part yet. So once we do that, what actually happened in the background before we cleared the screen of the simulator, what happened is that it ran this part of the code. Sorry, this part of the code, and so it again it's selected which item ID it belonged to. So if it was C1, it would add the third element of new sale item, which again corresponds to the fact that this is the third item that we are buying. So it said that the new sale item 3 is equals to item description 6, simply because because C1 belongs to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and sixth item in the table. And so C1 is the sixth item in the table, which is why it assigned item description 6 and price 6. Uh, but again, if C1 wasn't the item ID that was chosen, it's going to ignore all of this. And if C2 was the item ID it chose, then we're going to assign the item description 7, because C2 belongs to the seventh element. And so the third element of this, because again, for every category that we deal with, these indexes won't change, because let's say let's work from the top, right? If we are selecting a case, that is the first item we are buying, and so no matter what, whether it's A1 or A2, it will still be allocated, it will still be assigned to the first element of new sale item, simply because it is the first item we are buying again. And if we go back to the RAM, which is the second category, no matter if it's B1, B2, or B3, it will be assigned to the second index of the new sale item, simply because it's the second element we're buying. And again, lastly, with the C category, or rather the main hard disk drive category, no matter if it's C1, C2, or C3, with the corresponding table locations of 6, 7, and 8, it is still the third item we are buying. And so whatever the description and the price values are, whether they are the ones corresponding to C1, or the ones corresponding to C2, or the ones corresponding to C3, it will be assigned to new sale item 3, the third index of new sale item, and the third index of new sale item price, because their indexing simply shows the order in which we are choosing them, and this is the third item. So after we've done that in the simulator, we cleared the screen, and so the invoice is now the only thing you see, and so all of the process was cleared. But what happened in the background was that it assigned item code. It assigned item count to 3, which we will actually use later down the line in task 2 and 3. So we have just said that item code is equals to 3 here, so simply to be carried forward into a next task. This is where we print the output. Sir, am I correct in assuming that the invoice output can also be ignored from the
Yes.
exam point of view?
No,
Okay,
no, no, no. It should not be ignored and it should be printed the way
it
it
should be
is.
printed. Okay,
Thus, that is the requirement of your task one, that whatever the costing that's calculated should be shown with proper headings and
right.
tags.
Calculate the price, and store and output the chosen items. Right. So if you see here, task one, the last point says that we need to the last 2 points rather say that we need to calculate the price of the computer using the cost of the chosen items and the basic set of components. So no matter what we chose, the price of those items will be added to $200, which was the basic set of the price for the basic set of components. And we will also store and output the chosen items, and finally the grand total price of the computer. And so that's what's happening in these last few lines. This is the basic price of the computer. So computer price, which we declared way in the beginning, computer price right here, which I said that we will be using later to calculate the value of the computer. This is now being used finally. and we are first assigning it to the value 200. We are assigning the value 200 to it, which shows that whatever we add in this part will be added to 200, because whatever the cost of the items are, they are added on top of the $200. So we are now we're just going to show that what this actually is. And so this is the computer invoice. So this line corresponds to this line, and then this format corresponds to the fact that item description and item price are neatly arranged in these columns. And so now what we're doing is that we are again running a for loop with each index. And so we say that for x, for example, the first one is going to be x equals 1. So we're going to output new sale item 1, and we're going to output this line just means that this is going to contain the appropriate spacing between this and this. So basically, between the start and before 75, there are 40 spaces. So there's like 40 spaces between it, and whatever the length of this string was, we're just going to subtract those and then add the rest, just so that every single one of these has 40 spaces between the description and the item price. So that's what this part does. um so we're going to say
It
that
can be
my
ignored.
price, yeah,
It
yeah,
can be ignored.
from the exam point of view, it can be ignored. I just explained it so that they don't feel like there's something left that wasn't explained. So from
Yes.
the exam point of view, this part of this line, this can be ignored. So now we're saying that my price is the new sale item price X. We are outputting the price of this one. So what we've actually done is that we have first output the item, the first item that we chose. So now if we refer back to what we've been doing from the beginning, we are now using the new sale item array, which was on always the array to which the values were being assigned. So no matter what the actual description was, we were assigning those values to this array, which indicated that this is the first, second, or third. So far, we've only chosen three, which was the first, second, or third item that we have chosen. So we say that for x equals 1 to 3, so for the first loop, it's going to say x equals 1 for the first iteration. And so it's going to say new sale item 1 is going to output new sale item 1. So basically, this is the part that you actually need to write for your exams. So output new sale item 1 is going to output this item, because we assigned the description for the corresponding item that we chose in each element of new sale item. So this is case compact, and similarly for each corresponding value of x. So in other words, for each corresponding index of these two arrays, we are first storing the value for new sale item price, which was the second thing we assigned in each of the iterations. Um, in each of the selections, is that we are assigning the price of the corresponding item that we have chosen into this variable my price, which we will then output. Because if you notice from the task requirements, it says that we have to store and output the chosen items and the price and their price. So what we're doing here is that we are choosing we are displaying this, and we are displaying the corresponding price. So if I return to the code here, so this is what that does. And now we are totaling the computer price. So the computer price is equals to the previous computer price plus the new sale item price of whatever index we're currently on. So if we here we are working on the first item that we chose, which was the case compact. Whichever, whether it was A1 or A2, the corresponding price will be stored into the first element of this array, which we have now assigned to this. And we are adding that value to computer price. So what happened initially, again, this shows us the final output. So what actually happened as it ran this loop was that it saw that the computer price initially is 200, because that's what we set here, because that's the price of the basic set of components. And then it saw that the other price is $75, and so we added 75 to 200, and that is now the final computer price. Am I live? Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay,
I
so
can.
I think my internet disconnected. Sorry. Um, okay, so where did I leave off? Because I didn't notice. What was the last thing I said? Because my internet cut out.
Yes, you were at the second item that is selected.
Mm. Right. So once it exits this loop, or rather, once it tries to exit the loop, once it comes to next, it's gonna see that the variable x does not have the maximum value allowed within the loop. So it's gonna come back into here, and now it's going to increment the value of x. So it's done with the first iteration, and for the second iteration it's going to go with x equals 2. So for x equals 2, it's going to look at the second element that's stored in the new sale item and the new sale item price, and whatever it did previously is going to do all of that again. So it's going to output the description and the item price for the respective items. And so the second item, if you remember, we chose either B1 or B2 or B3, and so which were all RAMs, right? Which were random access memories. And so all of those, and so whichever one we chose was stored in here, and its corresponding price was stored in item price. And so we have now output both of those. And once again, whatever the price of this RAM is, the new second item, we're going to store that into my price. We're going to output that, and we are once again going to add that to the previous sum. So computer price is equals to computer price plus new sale item price. For the second iteration, computer price is actually now 200 plus 75. So it's 275, on top of which we are adding 149.99 because that's the new item price. Um, Once again, it tries to exit the loop, but it's not there yet. So it's gonna go back and it's gonna increment x to x equals 3, and it's gonna do all of that again for the third element, aka the third item that we chose, which was the hard disk drive. And so whichever we chose, the corresponding description is going to be output, and the corresponding price is going to be output. And right here we are going to add that price to the total we have so far. And so now that we have run this loop, we have iterated through it for all three values. We are now going to exit the loop, and we're just going to show that the basic set of components was indeed 200. Because when we output the final price, think of it as like the customer not understanding where $200 have been added, because he or she may add these values up and say that this does not match to this value. So why does this exist? So we just need to show him or her that the basic set of components was 200, and that is added to your grand total. And so it outputs the total price of the computer because that's what is asked. In the very final line of task 2 right here, it says store and output the chosen items and the price of the computer. And so throughout the code, the price of the computer had been added to this computer price, and finally we output that, and we reach this part of the code where we have now completed task 1, which said that we have to select one of each of these essential items. And now we have done that, and task 1 is now complete. Anything you want to add, sir, before I go into task 2?
Yes, yes. Let me explain task two, and then we go with the code and all.
Hmm. Okay. Should I stop my screen share?
Yes.
Okay.
As you can see, task one is explained, very well explained. Thank you, Hamza. Now let's take up with task two, ordering additional item. Now that the invoice that is created has basic components and all the three categories that we have chosen, and that it was the necessary part. Not it was just chosen, it was shown, it was actually an invoice at the end which shows the total cost up till now. Now it says that task 2 is the extension of task 1. It says that allow the customer to choose whether to purchase any items from the other categories. If so, which items? So now you can see that out of category 1, which is A1, A2 case, category 2, which is RAM, which is B1, B2, and B3, we have chosen one task. And then we have got category 3, which is C1, C2, and C3. out of these three categories, we have already chosen one of the item, and that was the requirement of task one. Now we have got other categories of solid state drive D1, D2, second hard drive E1, E2, E3, optical drive F1 and F2, and the operating system. So we have got four more categories. So system in task 2 basically asks to allow a customer to choose whether to purchase any item from the other categories as well. So there out of these all categories, three are necessary and four are optional. So if you want to choose further, you better tell your computer that yes, I want to choose further from other four categories. If so, then you would have to choose which items. And then one item when you pick, update the price. Update the price of the computer means whatever the invoice that was pre-calculated, which was calculated earlier, is now added with the new category that you have chosen. And then again, store and output the additional items to the new price of the computer. So the way we had output at the end of the task one, we would have another output at the end of the task two, which would be nothing but the extension of the invoice that was shown in task one and with the added category that we have chosen. So let's see how it works. Now, this is the invoice from task one. We go further and now we choose task two. Now it is showing all the items from other four categories: D1, D series, E series, F series, and G series. Solid state drives, hard disk drive, second hard disk drive, optical drives, and operating system. Now it is asking, as it says, allow a customer to choose whether to purchase items from the other category. It is simply means that we are asking the customer if they want to choose from other categories. If they want to ask for other categories, do you want to buy additional components? Is it appearing on the screen? The simulator comes up.
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. So all of the categories are being shown. Now this the code which actually showing these all categories is not required.
Um,
So
the
it
simulator
is
is
simply a
visible
quest.
for me, sir, but apparently it's not for some of the participants.
Yes. Okay. Now it should be.
Yeah,
Now it
it
should
is
be.
for me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Arham, can you see it
Okay.
now?
It must be. So
Okay.
all rest of the categories are being shown and it is being asked if you want to buy additional components. So let's say no. If you say no, you get back and the invoice is the same. If you say yes, if you say yes, so it will ask you for the additional item code. All right. We are showing the simulator, Arham.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, but apparently they still can't see it.
Let me check. Yes, it is appearing. It is appearing. Okay. Now we have to choose additional item. Let's say we choose F1, which is optical drive, DVD, Blu-ray, F1. So do you want to buy additional components? So it will keep asking you until you say no. So we don't want to purchase any other item. We just have chosen one item. All right. So now I say no. So you can see that this fourth category is also added, which is optical drive, DVD, Blu-ray player, and the price of the invoices are now updated. All right, so this is simple task which is actually allowing you to choose from other categories repeatedly in a loop, and as long as you are choosing, it is adding those items from the from these different categories to the invoice and updating the price of the invoice. And at the end, when you say no further item, it shows the invoice which is having all added item additional to those items which were chosen in task one. Yes, comes out to you.
Right. Just give me a second. Let me load up the task to
Okay,
load.
Hamza, let's have a
Yes,
break
sir.
for about 10 minutes, 10 minutes,
Okay,
and then we get back. All right.
sure, sure.
I'm going to stop this webinar, and we will
Okay,
get back with another stream.
fair enough.
Okay.
All right.